Hello and welcome to this Philbert Flies review of Drzewiecki Design's Tokyo Narita Airport add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator. You join me on approach to runway 16 right at Narita, and I'm starting with an approach to give you a look at the surrounding area and the chance to gauge the performance of this add-on on my system. You can find my system specs in the video description down below. I would say that this approach is ever so slightly more stuttery than at similar sized add-on airports I've flown into in the past. That said, it's important to remember that we're very close to the Tokyo photogrammetry area, and it's also important to remember that every system is different, so your mileage may vary. The stuttering certainly isn't significant, and looks far worse in the video than it does in the sim. The significant stuttering you'll notice on touchdown isn't present at all in the sim. This is something that happens with my video recording software from time to time, and I haven't found a way of fixing it. Anyway, enough waffle, I'll let you watch the approach and landing in peace, and I'll speak to you again when we're parked up at a gate. We'll have a good look around the scenery together in different weather and lighting conditions, and I'll finish up by giving you my overall opinion on it. Speak to you shortly. Welcome to Narita. We're parked up at Terminal 2's Gate 66 and we'll begin by having a little look at the jetway connecting to the aircraft. Custom model jetways throughout, as you will notice, and they do a very good job of connecting. There's no obvious gaps, the jetway hood doesn't appear to have gone through the skin of the aircraft, so good start. Moving on to look at the modelling of the jetway itself, and I think it's been very nicely done. Looks convincing to me, the textures are nice and crisp, and we've got a slightly uneven texture on the finish of the metal, which looks very realistic. The upper part of the jetways have transparent glass, and this has been very nicely implemented. You'll notice that it's slightly tinted, and it maintains its tint from the inside. You'll no doubt have noticed by now that the terminal building features more transparent glass and some pretty extensive interior modelling. But before we go inside to have a look at that, let's just take a look at the exterior. So the textures in use are really nice and sharp, nice and high resolution. They're not hugely weathered, but they look very nice nonetheless. The signage outside is super crisp and very nicely modelled, including the brackets attaching it to the terminal building. And if we move down to the bottom of the building, you'll notice that this is very nicely done as well, the same material used here. And underneath it we've got some very impressive looking concrete posts, which look very lifelike indeed, and a very nice uneven concrete backdrop. The height signage underneath the jetway connections is very nice as well, no blurriness whatsoever, and there's a good amount of detail modelled at the bottom of the jetway structures. Moving inside now, you'll notice that we have some 3D benches which look very good. The floor and ceiling textures are not the sharpest, but they are perfectly good. And we have a static backdrop used to represent shops and other areas of the airport in the distance. We don't have a huge amount of signage, we don't have a great deal of gate clutter or anything like that. But this certainly from the outside looks fantastic, and in my opinion it looks really perfectly good from the inside as well. As we move northwest along the exterior of Terminal 2, you'll notice that some opaque window textures have been used as well as some transparent glass, and I imagine this has been done to create a compromise between visuals and performance. The window textures that have been used look very, very realistic to me, and they're nice and sharp. You'll notice as we get closer that there isn't any blurriness whatsoever until you get right up next to them. From an aircraft cockpit perspective, these are flawless. The roof textures look really good as well, and there's a good amount of detail included in the modelling on the roofs. You'll notice we've got these rails along here which seem to be for these window cleaning cranes to move backwards and forwards along. And we've got a really nice looking roof terrace up here as well, with some fantastic fencing around it. Further along, we've got this beautifully modelled Narita Airport Terminal 2 sign. The detail in the structure to which it's attached is really, really impressive. The Terminal 2 pier has very little in the way of transparent glass, but it does make use of the same high-quality opaque window textures. There's very little repetition in these, and they look absolutely fantastic, even when you get close. You'll also notice that PBR materials have been used, so they reflect the light very convincingly. This is Terminal 1, and while I'm not going to show you every inch of it, suffice to say the standard of the interior and exterior modelling and texturing is every bit as high as that on Terminal 2. This is Narita's cargo terminal and apron. The terminal itself looks very good. The modelling and texturing is done to the same high standard as the passenger terminals. If I had any criticisms at all, it would be that it does look perhaps a little bit too clean. But the cargo apron itself is teeming with life and looks incredibly realistic. And talking of life, we have a good amount of ground clutter scattered around both passenger terminals as well. We've got luggage dollies, pallets, vehicles, air stairs, all sorts. And we also have a huge number of static aircraft. Now, I know people's opinions differ wildly on static aircraft. My own opinion changes with the wind. And today, I quite like them. I don't know why, I don't know what's happened. I would still like the option to turn them off if I wanted to, but I think the more I fly on VATSIM and end up at totally empty airports, the more appreciative I am of the odd well-modelled static parked up at the gate. Now, this is a huge airport and there are plenty of gates available. So as I say, right now for me, I think the static aircraft at this airport are a good thing. In terms of peripheral buildings, Narita features not one, not two, but 3 control towers, each with transparent glass and at least some level of interior modelling, and they look absolutely fantastic. The quality of the modelling and the texturing is very impressive indeed. We also have some very nicely modelled maintenance hangars. I was really pleased to find that the Narita Airport farm near the threshold of runway 34 right had been included and modelled so nicely. There's a link in the video description down below to a short video about the man who lives and works here. This is also a great place from which to admire the fencing. The developer's done a really good job of this, and as we get down close, you'll see just how lifelike the 2 fences here look. Let's talk ground textures. Around the aprons, the textures match the real airport very closely. The materials used and their colour are pretty much spot on. I do, however, have 2 criticisms. Firstly, the colours of the slabs are slightly too uniform, and secondly, they're just a bit too clean. If you have a look at the Google satellite imagery of Narita Airport, the ground is absolutely filthy with huge dark splodges all over the place. And while we do have a nice bit of rubber marking here and there and some little patches of dirt and grime, overall they're just a little bit too spotless. The same is true of the taxiways. The colour matching is pretty good, but again they're very clean, and the real airport seems to use some kind of tarmac slabs rather than the uniform tarmac that we see here. This is a minor criticism. Most people aren't going to fly in here and think, oh, that doesn't look quite like the Google photo. So I want you to take it with a pinch of salt, but I'm here to point out flaws as well as good things, and in my opinion these taxiways could be a little truer to life. It's much the same story with the runways. Overall, they impress me. I like this concrete patch, which is absolutely accurate. The font used for the runway numbers is spot on. The markings are perfect. I really like the amount of rubber around the touchdown zone. And broadly speaking, they look very realistic. But if you compare them with the real airport, you'll notice that they don't really look that true to life. So the materials used aren't spot on. The colours are slightly too light. So from a purist's perspective, from the point of view of someone who wants the airport in the sim to look as much like the real airport as possible, you might be a little bit disappointed. For someone who's going to fly in here and say, does this look like a real airport? Yes, absolutely it does, and there's a lot to like here. The grassy areas all look fantastic, and there's some really impressive custom modelled taxiway signage, which is super crisp and easy to read. If you get up close, you'll notice that these signs do float a little bit, but you're not going to get up close, so don't worry about it. The ground markings are absolutely fantastic. The fonts used are spot on, the shade of yellow is absolutely spot on, and the developers even gone to the trouble of giving the correct taxiway centre lines black borders. Some have them, some don't, and all of the ones I've looked at match the real airport absolutely perfectly. So I'm really impressed by all of this. The landside entrances to both terminals look really pretty good. Although the ground textures aren't the sharpest and the textures out the front of Terminal 2 here are a little bit blurry as well, we've got some absolutely fantastic details. The canopy looks great, we've got 3D parked cars, and just look at this ironwork up here with its rust. It looks incredibly lifelike. Over at Terminal 1 we even have transparent glass and a fully modelled check-in area. Here's Narita at night, and it's pretty hard to find fault with the night lighting, I must say. The apron lighting looks fantastic, the transparent glass looks very nice when lit from within, although it does lose its tint, which is a little bit of a shame, and even the opaque window textures look pretty good. Terminal 1 looks similarly impressive. The landside areas feel incredibly atmospheric by night. And the taxiway and runway lighting looks pretty much spot on. Narita looks absolutely fantastic in the rain. The ground textures look great when they're wet, and although we do have a little hint of the transparent windows popping when they should be shrouded in mist, which is an Asobo problem, the windows at this airport look a lot better than many I've seen, and I don't know why this is. But anyway, great job. I would say the developer has done a better job than most with the implementation of snow. The apron areas look really good. I love the patchiness of the snow underneath the jetways, that looks very realistic. And the ground markings are partially covered in snow. That said, we do have these red lines sticking out like sore thumbs and not getting any snow on them whatsoever. And we do have some really sharp edges around the taxiways and some areas that have no snow on them at all. The runways look pretty good. They have a light dusting of snow in places but are mostly clear, which to me feels pretty realistic. And the same is true of the taxiways. They've got a bit of a dusting here and there. To be honest, I think this would look perfectly fine were it not for the really sharp lines between the taxiways and the grassy areas, but overall definitely an above average job. So what do I think of Drzewiecki Design's Narita? I really love it. It's a truly beautiful, lifelike representation of the airport, and it's somewhere that I'm going to want to visit again and again. Sure, it's not perfect. The ground textures aren't 100% true to the real thing, and some of the buildings could perhaps do with a tiny bit more weathering. But let's be honest here, this is all just nitpicking. It really is a fantastic piece of work. Super detailed models of all the terminal buildings, fantastic crisp textures throughout, great interior modelling, super accurate ground markings, 3 superbly modelled control towers, some great clutter, and some of the best and most atmospheric night lighting I've ever seen. I've used some of Drzewiecki Design's airports in earlier sims and they've been reliably good, but this is really next level stuff. And it's fantastic to see a good developer turning into a truly great one. So there you have it, another one for your shopping list, I'm afraid. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please do click the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and if you'd like to, you can also support me with a donation via Streamlabs or buymeacoffee.com. Details are in the video description down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies.